One of the core key problems that we have in our democracy, in our republic here in the United States, is that our political class, entirely the Republican political class, and to some consequential extent, the Democratic political class, does not represent the interests of the people, but instead represent the interests of their donors. Now, the good news on the Democratic side is that the unions are still major players, and unions are democracies themselves, and they're made up of the people, of voters. And so you have some politicians like Sherrod Brown and Bernie Sanders who get donations from union members, and the union members make up, the largest part of their donor base. Fine thing. That's the people. That's the voters. But on the other hand, you look at, other politicians, and not so much. And it's because of, 34 years of Reaganomics has destroyed not only the American middle class, but destroyed the donor base for the Democratic Party, the unions. 75% of Americans. You will never hear this. You will never hear this mentioned on corporate television or most corporate radio, because it is inconsistent with the interests of their owners, who are the donor class, right? 75% of Americans want trade policies that protect workers, the environment, and jobs in the United States, rather than the trade policies that we have right now, which make multinational corporations like Apple and Nike mind-bogglingly rich. People like Phil Knight and Tim Cook, mind-bogglingly rich. But don't do a damn thing for the American worker. Or very, very little, if that. 75% of Americans. When was the last time you heard a debate about that on Morning Joe? Instead, speaking of Morning Joe, you get this bizarre situation where, for example, apparently this was September 4th's show, so this was a week ago. Or last week. On this is fascinating. I got this at Media Matters, by the way. This is from the September 4th blog by Craig Harrington and Timothy Johnson. On Morning Joe, they do the first hour, which I think is at 6 a.m. I'm never up early enough to see it, but I think it's 6 to 7 a.m. And then in their third hour, which is 8 to 9, they replay much of the first hour so that, makes it easier to do television, plus the amount of audience that you've kept from 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. is fairly small in the morning shows. People get up, they watch TV while they're eating breakfast, and then they leave. So David Ignatius was on Joe Scarborough's show, and he debunked the Clinton email scandal, just completely debunked it. Here's what he said specifically. He said, my point is, he says, this issue comes up surprisingly often because there's an administrative problem where people, this is about the Clinton emails. There's an administrative problem where people do these things and their security officers summon them and warn them and issue reprimands, and it goes in their file, and it's a serious personnel administrative problem. Now, that sounds like a criticism of Hillary Clinton, right? And when they replayed the show at 9 o'clock, they stopped his quote there. But when the show was live at 6 a.m., he continued to say, my only point is I couldn't find a case where this kind of activity has been prosecuted. And that's just worth noting as we assemble our Clinton email. And one more thing, Joe, legally there is no difference between her using her private server and if she'd used state.gov, which is also not a classified system. The idea that, this would have been fine if she used state.gov, not legally, no difference. In other words, there's no legal difference. There's no physical difference. State.gov is not a secure server either. It's not to be used for secure communications. That got edited out of the third hour of Joe Scarborough's Morning Joe show. It's like, gee, if we don't like what the Democrats have to say, or if we don't like something that might support the Democrats, we'll just take it out. We'll just edit it out.